Hey everyone, this is Baron Cinder. Today I'm going to be playing a game that really needs no introduction. It is, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. This is the first one in the series that lets you save your game. I'm just going to start a new one in this case. A lot of the games I play I'm just kind of indifferent about, but this one I think is a true classic. I will admit to being a fanboy of the classic Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't think they ever quite got it right with the 3D ones. Although I think some of the hating that goes on is a little out of line. But yeah, this is a pretty fine example of platforming at its best. When you compare it to the older ones, you see the animations are just so smooth and the control is just so tight. In my opinion, this is one of the games that really stood the test of time. I have as much fun playing it now as I did back in the day. This would have come out in the mid to late 90s. Pretty basic gameplay. You're just, for the most part, you're moving from left to right. You're collecting rings. If you get 100 of them, you get an extra life. You can also collect all the Chaos Emeralds if you're a completionist. That will let you turn into Super Sonic. And yeah, you're just chasing the bad guy around. Dr. Robotnik or Eggman. So yes, as always, we start off on a really lush green landscape, and at that point it just gets torched, which changes the look of the level. The great thing about Sonic for me is just how big he is on the screen and how quickly he moves. That's something that the Mario series, for example, has never really been able to pull off. Despite being a Sonic fanboy, I have to say that over time, the Mario games have, they've definitely been more consistent in their quality, but they weren't this fast. The action wasn't quite, it was a different experience, definitely. I would say the Mario games had better level design, more thoughtful level design, but the Sonic games had faster action, and maybe were just a little bit prettier to look at. And as a guy who's into art, that counts for something with me. So that was a mid-level boss. You used to only have bosses at the end of the second or third act. This introduces kind of a minor sub-boss, which usually isn't that tough, but just sort of adds to the excitement there. Whoops, I don't think I can really get away from this. Okay, we'll do a bonus level. Trying to collect all the blue spheres to get a Chaos Emerald. And the trick, which took me a long time to learn, is to skirt around the edges and turn them all into rings. And for whatever reason, that does count as touching all the blue ones. This doesn't look great by today's standards, but this was a fairly impressive example of 3D sprite scaling on the Genesis. I think that's the right term. Oops, I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Oh no. Ugh. That's the other way to do it. Just literally touch all the blue spheres. But yeah, this effect was pretty impressive for its day. It's similar to the Mode 7 scaling on the Super NES. And as you can see by the horizon here, we seem to be running on top of a giant sphere. And as you collect more and more blue ones, it gets faster and faster. Gotta watch out for those bouncing ones there. Oh, looks like I got it. So yeah, by collecting rings, you get extra lives and continues. And if you can actually manage to get all 8 of the Chaos Emeralds, you can grab 50 rings and jump and turn into Supersonic, who is basically invincible to everything but crushing, being crushed by platforms. But he consumes rings. I have a water shield around me here. That means I can stay in the water without drowning, without having to worry about those air bubbles. Levels are nice and short for the most part. Sonic 2 introduced the 2-act levels with a boss at the end of the second one. Sonic 1 had 3 acts to every level, and it kind of dragged on. It got really tedious. So I think 2 is a good magic number here. I really like the look of Sonic in this one. They've refined it from some of the previous games. He just has so many new and different animations, like when he was hanging from that rope or whatever. It's a really good soundtrack, and I'm sorry I can't play that for you here. Just worried about the content ID. Poor Tails. Here we have an airship dropping bombs, and they're quite easy to avoid as long as you just keep pressing forward on the D-pad. Oh, poor Tails. I like what they've done here. We can see that there are several layers of depth to the background. And there's our old friend Robotnik in all his mustachioed glory. Gotta be careful. If I attack him when he goes into the waterfall, I could go over the edge. So much for his little contraption there. As always, you free all the animals at the end of the level, because all the robots are just trapped little animals. It's something that's carried over from the very first game. And here we have the introduction of Knuckles. He's kind of a villain slash anti-hero who was featured prominently in the next game, Sonic and Knuckles. And that was a really interesting novel concept for the Sega Genesis, because it allowed you to lock on and add extra content, extra content to previous games in the series. Kind of like the first ever DLC. Gotta watch out for those underwater levels. Whenever you're underwater without one of those shields, you have to find little air bubbles or hit the surface for air. And if you don't, you'll have a really frantic 5-second countdown. Like so. Oh, got some air there. It's funny, I remember reading comments on other YouTube videos about that 5-second countdown and the really frantic little song it plays being a really traumatic childhood experience for some people, and that they hear that little song in their nightmares, which to me indicates pretty good music composition. When you have the water shield, you can also bounce downward really quickly, like so. And with the water shield, I'm immune to the projectiles of that clam thing that was shooting at me. I like how you can see his nostrils here. I guess that's what that is. Again, that's indicative of how the graphics are just so much cleaner than on the previous two Sonic games. Where am I supposed to go? I used to know these levels like the back of my hand, but it's been a little while since I've played them. This is one of those sections that basically plays itself. But it's fast, and that's technically impressive. Ooh, those little fish there are horrible. They sort of latch onto you and prevent you from jumping, as I recall. Okay, what do we got here? There we go. Oh, I hate those little fish. Okay, here's another bonus stage. Didn't mean to... Oh, you have to bounce up the walls here and operate the sort of gumball machine thing. I don't really understand what power-ups it gives you, but... Oh no. I didn't want that. It replaced my water shield with an electric one. Oh, no it didn't. Okay. Oh, this thing speeds you up. Oh no, that was pretty vicious. Gotta watch out for little tricks like that. I think my favorite Sonic the Hedgehog game in the series, believe it or not, was Sonic CD, which came out for the Sega CD originally and for the PC. And many years later it was sort of rediscovered and ported to Android platforms and the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. And it was kind of an enhanced version. I think somebody added Tails to it. and re-released it. And when Sega saw it, they were actually kind of cool. I think instead of trying to sue him, they were like, "Hey, let's make a deal and split the profits." And it was one of those cases where everybody kind of won. Sonic CD has graphics that are similar to the first Sonic game, so maybe less detailed than in this game, but the soundtrack is what really does it for me. It, of course, has better music because it is on a CD. So I'm trying to avoid being crushed. The wall's moving from the left here, and I need to get away from it. I think the re-released version of Sonic 3D, Sonic CD, gives you a choice between the American and the Japanese soundtrack, and I really prefer the American. It's got some really crazy sort of metal guitar riffs, while other levels are just kind of relaxing and they have vocals. It's good stuff. I would definitely recommend checking that out. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. I don't want this video to drag on too much, but I think I'll just play to the end of this level and cut it off there. Possibly do more later if I feel like it. It's cool, I like how he's rotating. Someone criticized the Sonic games for not having a lot of depth, but I don't know, they're pretty and they're fast and they make good use of the hardware, definitely. That's kind of enough for me. I was one of those lucky kids that eventually had both a Genesis and a Super Nintendo, but I had the Genesis first, and I bought it with my own money, so it will always hold a special place in my heart. Actually, I bought a Game Gear first, and it gave me really bad headaches, so I took it back and got a Genesis for about the same price. I think the Genesis was a much wiser decision, although I did get a used Game Gear years later. Never really cared for the Sonic games on that. They were a lot different, to be sure. I think the first Sonic game on the Game Gear, I couldn't even get past the first boss. It was just the timing and the movement were so awkward. Of course, I don't claim to be any kind of protege, but that was a bit harsh. And here's Knuckles again. Bastard. Oops, I really don't want to do that bonus level again. Need to avoid those little stars. Ooh, okay. Okay, so we're going to hit Robotnik when he comes down. Then we're going to run to avoid getting sucked into the propeller there. And then we can jump on that jet of water and hit him again. Now he's going to drop some depth charges that go off after 1 second. And if you time it right, you can jump into the burst and hit him again. If you're in the right place. Good old Tails is scoring some hits for me. At that save and load screen, you can choose to play by yourself without Tails, or you can be just Tails. I don't think you can be Tails with Sonic following, as I recall. Okay, well, that's the first 2 levels of Sonic 3, which is, in my opinion, a really well-done platformer. Definitely one of the best in the series. Going to go ahead and cut it off there, though I may do another video in the future. Thank you very much for watching.